Good evening, everyone. I'm very happy that we're here tonight and that we have the opportunity to be together in person. When I first joined, I was very pleased to be able to come here in this hall and sit down with people at a table. And I think I've told this story many times, but if it weren't for joining CAPCA and having somebody at the table say, "So, Tony, are you making money with your license?" And I went, "What? I can make money with my license?" And they said, "Well, yeah, you can do deliveries, you can do this, and you can teach." And that's what I decided to do is to teach. So, but if I hadn't had live meetings, that's not going to happen on Zoom. So I'm really, really happy that we're gathering together in one place, sharing stories and just seeing each other face to face. We have, I want one important announcement to make, and that is that our fall meeting, which is usually in November, but it's going to be December 1st, is our fall meeting, and that's when we're going to have our elections. So we need to have a quorum to have the elections. So please be here and invite other members to be here. It's a members only meeting, and we need a quorum 10%, and now we're up to 340 plus. So we need at least 34 people, members in this room for the nomination for December 1st. December 1st. All right. So we have a very nice program tonight that Cheryl has arranged. But before I do that, I'm not going to begin the wrap up yet because that doesn't come until 8:15. But let's go to the next slide. These are the board officers at this point. Tony, that's me. Davis Jones is our vice president. Greg Pabst is our assistant vice president. Bob Thompson is our secretary, and Carl Bart is our treasurer. Now, Carl, we've seen him here over and over and over again. Carl has moved. He now lives not in Texas. He lives in Texas, right? He lives in Texas. He had to get out of Maryland, is the story. Now, it says here that the communication position is vacant, and Hillary House has been very, I'm very appreciative that Hillary decided to stand in that spot until the elections come up and we have a new communications director. So thank you, Hillary, for doing that. Our continuing education, Tate Westbrook is new in this position. I don't think Tate is here. Oh, hey, very good. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Laura is our jobs program, and she's doing a great job at listing the programs. And I really think that she's been really wonderful at getting the jobs listed and then seeing that they're posted properly and being filled. So interestingly, I saw one that I wanted, and it's like, it was just posted, and I would call the guy. He said, "No, I'm already working with a captain." I went, "Oh, that was quick." It's very good. Phil is our membership director. Programs, Cheryl, Dave Sire is our webmaster. Thank you, Dave, for all the work that you do. And our members at large, Hillary, Alan Carpus, and Rob Doolittle. And I want to thank everybody for their service on the board of directors. Next slide. It's coming. It's coming. We always need more volunteers. We have Alan at the boat show has done a wonderful job at filling the spaces that we have for the boat show and developed this wonderful, what do you call this? Backdrop. Thank you. And when people walk by and see something like this, they say, "Oh, what's that?" And we've been very good at recruiting people from the boat show to join CAPCA. And I'm very proud that we're making these kinds of steps at the boat shows. So thank you, Alan, for that work. Now it says we have an immediate need of a director of communication, but I'm very happy to say that Will Fink sitting here, has agreed to accept the nomination for that position we'll be voting on that in December. Let's see here. Capital elections are on December 1st, as I said. Now it's going to be at the Elks Lodge, but we'll be able to receive votes by Zoom. But we still need a quorum I think a quorum in this room. Yeah, I'd like to see a quorum in this room personally. If you are interested in nominating yourself or someone else with their permission, send those nominations to me or to Bob Thompson. Okay, next slide, new members. We have some new members. We have lots. I mean, I'm really impressed that we have new members. And I'm very happy to say that Cheryl has done a great job of preparing the packages for the new members. Now, the last time we had a personal meeting was in June. So July, August, and September, if your name is on this and you're here, stand up. So you get a welcome package. Thank you very much for joining. And you are? Raymond. Oh, I see you, right, September, right in the middle, and I missed it. Thank you, Raymond, for being with us. Buster. Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. What was who? You? When did you join? All right. Well, thank you for joining. And what is your name? Ken Marster. Thank you very much. Barster. Good. All right. I would like to have Alan come up for the next slide because it talks about the boat show.
Thank you, Tony. This is actually going to be very brief because he already said everything that needed to be said on it. That we've got a really good group of people that are working both at the Power Boat Show and at the Sailboat Show. And I just want to stand here right now and say thank you to all of our volunteers that have offered to come out and help us grow the organization. The function at the boat show is to do twofold. Number one is to recruit new members that have their captain's license, obviously, and tell them what we can do for them. And the other one is to find jobs for those people that are members of our organization. So we have it all set up that way, and those of you that are going to be working at the show will get more information from me exactly how to go about doing that. And anything else? Nope. All right. Cheryl, our program chairperson, our director, it's all yours.
Good evening, everyone. I'll review a couple of slides before I introduce our speaker. So on your tables, and we don't have one for everyone, but just enough, and you can take a picture if you need it, or go to our website. This color page talks about the upcoming programs and tours. Programs are always free and always open to everyone, and all of them are available by Zoom. And this year we had 4 a year that were in this room. So this is our last one in person for the year as a program with a speaker, not to take the place of that elections that are very important and our annual business meeting in December. But this is the last program for that's in person for the year. The next program is by Zoom on October 27th. And will be American Boat. It's about the ABYC, American Boat and Yacht Council, as a valuable resource to CAPCA and others as well. So we're looking forward to one of our own members speaking about that. November 12th, very important to understand, this is a members only tour that we've arranged for Trade Point Atlantic Marine Terminal in Baltimore, Maryland. So say that again. I'm sorry, did I hear something? Okay. We can only have a max of 30 people. Right now, there are 13 spots remaining. So if you're at all interested, please sign up as soon as possible if you're a member. A couple weeks before that, I think I just sent it to Dave today. I think it's October 20th. We will start accepting if we don't have 30 people, we will then open it to guests of the people who are already registered. Okay, so but at this point, it's just members only. We're really excited about that. The cost of it is to afford the motor coach that's going to be taking us around that very large facility, acres and acres and acres. Okay. Then the fall business meeting and dinner that Tony has mentioned at December 1st from 5 to 9 here in this room. So those are the things coming up. Next slide. It is time for, one more thing before we do the 50-50. I did want to point out there are green sheets on your tables as well and some pens. So please, if you don't have enough on your table, go to another table and grab one. At the end, we would like to have your feedback and suggestions for programs for next year because we're starting to work on those. All right. So now 50-50. Greg Paps. Hopefully you have the totals. We're going to ask. Okay. Who did not, can I ask somebody to pull that does not have a ticket in here? Does everybody have a pull? A new member, did they? All right. You're going to be very popular. Okay. You got them single now? Four, 3, 8, Joe. All right. And Joe, you're a relatively new member, aren't you? Yeah. Awesome. Congratulations, Joe. All right. Thank you, Greg Paps, for always doing this important job for us. All right. Next slide. Okay. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening, Kathy Bergren Smith. You can see on your table, there is a little bio about her. It talks about that she spent more than 20 years bringing maritime world to life through her words and photographs. She was the East Coast correspondent for WorkBoat magazine and covered the gritty, fascinating world of commercial vessels and the people who work them. And then for over a decade, she was staff photographer at the Port of Baltimore. So one of America's busiest harbors and one of my favorite places. Today, she makes her home on the Maryland's West River, just a short distance from where the subject for tonight, where this schooner was capsized. But what I really want to say about Kathy is in the limited time that she and I got to know each other a couple months ago when I asked her to speak tonight, I want to tell you that this is my personal copy of her book. I don't understand why I missed this a couple years ago when it came out. And she was on the speaker circuit a little bit. I don't know where I was. I have no idea. But I came to learn about this book. So I bought it. I bought it on, I think, Barnes & Noble because I wanted to support a local store because I'm so scared that store is going to go out of business. So I didn't want to get it to Amazon. Anyway, I bought it on Barnes & Noble. It came to my house, and I don't read books with my eyes anymore. I read them with my ears. So I'm driving somewhere. I'm always doing an audio book, but this is a book that I had to actually sit down and read. And I thought, oh, I hope I make time for this. So I opened it up. An hour later, I'm still sitting in my chair reading this book. And I didn't think that I would be that captivated, and I was. So I finished it the next day, and at dinner in between, I talked to my husband about this. He never reads books like this. So I just sat it down. He picked it up. He finished it in a day and a half. So we both talked about how fascinating it was. It's got great pictures. It's wonderfully researched, all this. I wonder who this author was, is what we were talking about. So that weekend, following weekend, we have a sailboat. So we're going to go out. We go out every weekend in the summer if we can. And the the low for that Saturday night was going to be 85 degrees. And my husband, dutiful husband that he is, knowing that I want to do this more than he does, he had packed his bag. It was by the front door. I'm packing mine. I walked downstairs and I said, you know what? I don't think I have it in me. And I'd also just worked the day before as a captain of the Miss Am for Watermark, and it had been a really hot day and I had almost heat exhaustion. So I'm like, I don't think I can not be in air conditioning tonight. So I said, I have a suggestion. I said, why don't we go to North Beach for the day? We both just finished reading this book. We're both captivated by it. Why don't we just go and literally stand on the shore and like look and picture where this accident happened that led to all this legislation that now the U.S. Coast Guard requires in our entire country. And it happened because of right here in the Chesapeake. So my husband says, I think that's a great idea. So we went and we spent the morning at North Beach. They have a museum that opens from 9 to 12. And then we had lunch, and then we went down to Chesapeake Beach, just a couple miles down further, and went to the train museum that's from 1 to 4. It was an amazing day and brought me even closer to understanding this well-researched and amazing book. So it is with my distinct pleasure to introduce Kathy Bergren Smith, who is going to regale us with this amazing story and help us understand it with all of her amazing research. So let's welcome Kathy.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. That was very kind introduction. And I have to say, I'm myself honored to be here tonight with all these captains. It's great. I don't have to remember anybody's name. But I think you'll find this an interesting story for two reasons. One is that it occurred here in Chesapeake in waters that I'm sure you guys are very familiar with. And, two, it led to legislation that impacts most of you that are working in the passenger vessel trade and in these small, on these small ships. So with that, let me step over here. I think I might be getting feedback from the other. Yeah. Okay. So if I stand here, I'm better, maybe. So let's start with the next slide. And I'll tell you that this evening, the photographs you're going to see are also in my book, and they are predominantly done by a very amazing photographer who was by the name of A. Aubrey Bodine, who was a Baltimore photographer during the early part of the 1900s up until about 1950. He retired. And I had access to his archive for this book. He sailed on the Levin Marvel twice while she was a working vessel, and then again while she was a schooner taking passengers for hire. And so that's the crux of the story. Next slide. We have our vessel here, Levin J. Marvel. She was built in 1898 in Bethel, Delaware. For you schooner nerds, she's a 3-masted, bald head ram schooner. She had gaff rigs, very, very heavy gaff rigs, but she was no topsail. And this was a very purpose-built vessel. She's 128 feet long and 26 feet in beam. The reason being, she had one major job. She also had, interestingly, I'll say a centerboard, a drop keel, because her job was these schooners was a very successful class of schooners in the early part of the 1900s. They traveled south to the tidewater of Virginia and North Carolina, and then they took lumber through the C&D Canal. By using the C&D Canal, they were able to beat their competitors to Philadelphia and New York to drop off that lumber by almost a week. The C&D Canal at that time was a sea level canal, no locks, no, sorry, 4 locks, other way around, and it only was 28 feet wide. So she could squeeze by and get through and get up there and beat everybody else. Very successful class of schooner. Next slide. But like all of the schooners in the coastal trade, the development of our highway system and trucking rendered them pretty much obsolete. And so most of the old fleet of ram schooners were left to molder, like the beautiful Jenny Lee Bell here. This was the last operating merchant marine licensed sailing vessel in America. His octogenarian and his wife ran this out of Salisbury for, I don't know, 50 or 60 years until they retired. I think their kids made them retire. But the boats just went to seed. Next slide. But not so the Levin Marvel. There was a guy who worked for the B&O Railroad. He was an engineer, actually, not a train engineer, an engineer. And he went to Maine and took a windjammer cruise. And he came back to Maryland and said, why on earth aren't we doing this in the Chesapeake Bay? It's miserable weather in Maine, rocky coast, terrible sailing for this sort of thing. Why don't we do it here? So he purchased the Levin Marble and he took that big cargo, flat bottom cargo hold and converted it into cabins and created a entirely new form of vacation here on Chesapeake, the Dude Cruise. He was very successful. He ran out of Baltimore initially on 1-week trips, and this is starting in 1944. And it was just at the end of World War II when people were coming back, had a little jingle in their pocket, and there really wasn't that much of an opportunity to do vacationing. So remember, the Bay Bridge wasn't built yet, so people, and then there were a lot of single people that were in the area from all of the various military installations, and women who had come to work in Washington during the war. And these young single gals, they really had no opportunity for an escape without going with family members as the spinster aunt or something. And so he really hit a chord with a cosmopolitan group of people. He advertised heavily in New York and Washington and Philadelphia, and young people that wanted a bit of an adventure, maybe had a little bit of nostalgia for the day of sail, the old days of sail. They loved his vessels. And he had 2 of them. You could do the next slide. He bought the Edwin and Maude, a second vessel, same Chesapeake ram schooner, built in Bethel in 1901. And the Edwin and Maude, he was in really a bigger and better ship. So he took her on 2-week cruises. He moved the operation to Annapolis and ran it all through the late 40s into the early 1950s, when he just was, ready to retire and decided to move down to his farm in Virginia. And he sold the Edwin and Maude right away to the Windjammer fleet in Maine. And it was renamed Victory Chimes and sailed in Maine until, I'm going to say, 2 summers ago was her last summer on the water carrying passengers. Levin J. Marvel did not have such good luck. He just shoved it up in the weeds like all of these old vessels up at Salisbury until this guy came along. Our next slide, a guy from Pennsylvania who had bounced around a bit, served in the Coast Guard during World War II. Next slide. Let's see if we see him. Yeah. Well, this guy, John Meckling, kind of an interesting character. Not a licensed captain, but a real raconteur and a good-looking guy. He was said to have more than a passing resemblance to Ronald Reagan, a young Ronald Reagan. He was in his early 30s, and he really got bitten by the sailing bug and bought a skipjack from somebody in Deal Island and sailed all around the Eastern Shore. And he came across the Levin Marvel in Salisbury. It had now been in the weeds for about 18 months. And he said, man, if anybody could resurrect this business, it's me. And he convinced his wife to move to Annapolis. They were in Pennsylvania. And he purchased with a loan from his cousin. He had no money. He purchased the vessel and started working on her, and immediately started sending out those fancy flyers and putting the ads back in the New York and Philadelphia and Washington newspapers. And people read these ads and said, oh my gosh, the Levin J. Marvel's back. We had such a good time on those. And he started getting immediately reservations. This is the summer of 1954. So he hires one of the old salt captains that had worked for Herman Nust. And he says, listen, let's take the boat over to Annapolis. He rented that far, if you walk out City Dock, the very furthest berth out is what he had. The harbor master let him lay up there. I don't know what he paid. He lived on there. And he said, I've got my berth, and I'm going to familiarize myself with the vessel by hiring you to take me from Salisbury to Annapolis. Now, that's kind of nervy, like 128 schooner when you're like, yeah, good on a skipjack, like a 24-foot skipjack. It was nervy. And next slide, they got exactly 9 miles down the Wicomico when the captain had to run her aground because she was sinking. It took the Coast Guard from Crisfield and the Salisbury fireboat something like 10 hours to dewater the vessel and tow it to this boatyard at Whitehaven. And the captain at that point said, well, I think I've had enough of this project. And Meckling was by himself, and he had made very savvily, he had done a lot of press releases, and he had a lot of press coverage. And the Salisbury newspaper reporter came and said, well, what are you going to do now? You've got all of these people waiting for you to get the boat to Annapolis. He said, I'm not worried. It's $50 worth of caulking. We'll take care of this problem. So, and as many of you who are familiar with wooden boats would know, if you have a wooden boat and you shove it up in the weeds for a couple of years, it's going to dry up and the caulk is going to go loose. And as soon as they hit the water in the Wicomico, the thing started leaking like a sieve, right? So here he is. He's got the people. He's having to cancel like 2 weeks worth of cruises that he's already taken deposits on. He takes the little tender, we'll call it, which is called a yawl boat. So this vessel has no means of propulsion apart from its sails. So the yawl boat pushes it around, right, with like a car engine in it, if you can imagine a tender like that. He takes this all the way to Baltimore, pushing it with his little rowboat, essentially. And he gets to Baltimore and he takes it to the Booz Brothers shipyard, which is in Fells Point. Picture 1955 in Baltimore. It is happening, right? You've got Bethlehem Steel, the largest steel manufacturer in the world. You've got shipyards all along Key Highway. He takes it to Booz Brothers and says, caulk everything above the waterline. I'll be back in the fall. So he does. Next slide, please. The captain of the port, Coast Guard captain of the port, Alfred Cabernagle, got wind of this and was aghast. He could not believe that this old relic, that's his word, was going to take passengers for hire. And he immediately sent his marine inspectors to the Booz Brothers shipyard to put a stop to it, because this was just not going to happen. It was way too dangerous. So Meckling confronts these marine inspectors and argues quite properly that they have no jurisdiction over him. And the old Levin J. Marvel sinking ship, because sailing vessels at that time under 700 gross tons, now that's fairly large for a sailing vessel, were uninspected. Therefore, apart from a simple safety inspection, like a Coast Guard would do today, there was nothing that they could do. There was no manning requirements, there was no licensing requirements, and there were mainly, next slide, there was no capacity requirements. Now, Coast Guard had been agitating for years on Capitol Hill to get legislation to inspect these small passenger vessels. Under 150 gross tons for the motor vessels and under 700 for the sailing vessels were uninspected, including the Pelican here, like the poster child of this. This is Montauk, Long Island, the furthest point at Long Island. They had a thing called the Fisherman's Express on Saturdays and Sundays. Out of Manhattan, you could bring your tackle and your rod and buy a $2 ticket out to Montauk at 6 a.m. As many people as they could fit on these boats, they'd take them out fishing for the day and then bring them back, and they'd all go home and have a fish dinner. The Pelican in 1952 or 3, it might have been 3, she's 47 feet long. She had 67 people aboard, paying passengers. You could just, they all did. You can see that's the fleet going out. And these guys, what happened was, in the case of the Pelican, these 67 passengers, they got into a heavy swell. This is Long Island Sound. And they got into a heavy swell, and she started to take it side too, and everybody ran, of course, to the high side, which just capsized the boat. 47 people lost their lives that day. Coast Guard was unable to convince Congress to legislate. Now, in today's world, we can relate to that. I mean, that's nothing new. So Congress is not acting. Coast Guard is infuriated. Meckling is right, and we can have the next slide, and has smooth sailing. He had a great season. They took 8 trips in 1954 out of City Dock in Annapolis. He'd invite people to come on Sunday and sleep on the vessel. You know, you bring your stuff, and he sent them right over to Mills first, you know, because you've got to get provisions. And then, you know, like any good cruise, food is critical. And he had like secret weapon chef, Ellery Pinckney of the Annapolis Pinckneys, of the Cook Pinckney VFW post, had served in World War II as a Navy cook, but he was an incredible cook. And he specialized in Chesapeake Bay seafood. So they would have alfresco crab feasts on the deck. He would make these remarkable crab cakes. And all this stuff was free/cheap food for Meckling, who had no money, to be serving his city slickers. And so they would stay on board, they'd have fabulous dinner, they'd sleep over and set forth on Monday morning. And it was a ruse, right? Because remember, the Coast Guard, all they have to do is catch him using that yawl boat as propulsion, and he's a motorboat. And he is subject to all the regulations and inspection, right? So he had this ruse where his wife would come on board while the people hadn't paid any money yet, and they were guests, and he could not sail that thing off of City Dock. I mean, the sails are enormous, and 90-foot masts, 3 of them, right? Imagine trying to sail off with that. And so his wife would come out and she'd collect everyone's money, and they'd shove off with the yawl boat. They'd get out into the Severn, raise the sails, she'd scoot around and collect everybody's money, because then they'd be paying customers. Heretofore, they were just guests. And then she'd jump in the yawl boat and one of the deckhands would run her home. And that's how they got away with it, like all summer. And they had a great summer. And next slide. And he did not necessarily take that, no. He did not take that ship back to Booz Brothers in the fall, as you can imagine. He had no money. And so he did not take it back. He did not caulk below the waterline. He did not have it hauled. 1955 season, he was ready to roll. You know, this is Levin Marvel in Galesville, where I live in West River. You know, one of many happy cruises. So 1955 season rolls around, and he's got Ellery Pinckney back cooking, and then he gets these 2 young kids who were rising seniors at the Severn School, who were deckhands, perfect deckhands. One was the son of a Navy admiral, and the other guy was, you know, the son of some rich offshore sailboat racing aficionado. So the kid had a lot of offshore racing experience, lots of sailing experience, and they both had great manners. And so they were really an excellent crew, along with Meckling, who was a very, very affable host. Everybody loved him. Next slide. And so they had this same suite of advertising and had a completely booked season. And it started off really well, and it went well all summer. Now, next slide. The people that got on the last voyage, which was August 8th, was the last voyage leaving Annapolis, were pretty typical of the people that would be on these trips. Here you have a guy named Bart Roberts and his wife, Frances. He's a very up-and-coming psychiatrist at Yale University. They've left their 2 toddlers in New Haven with a nanny so they can go on their first vacation after their honeymoon. They were thrilled when they realized that Louis Sobel and his wife Mina were aboard. He was a very famous social scientist himself. He had been in charge of the Joint Committee during World War II and saved hundreds, thousands of orphans in Poland and Germany, smuggled these Jewish kids away and saved them by putting them in the States. So there was, I think there were 4 medical doctors aboard. There was a dentist with his wife and 2 children. There were any number of single people. Again, there was a woman who was 26 from Rochester, New York. She was an avid outdoors woman. And, you know, again, in 1955, if you are an avid outdoors woman and you're single, there's not a lot of opportunity to go on a vacation. So she was on there. There was a woman from Washington who had worked in copywriting for many years. Just a very interesting group. Next slide. And this guy, he was 16. His name is John Ferguson. He's the last living survivor right now of the trip. He was 16 at the time. He was obsessed as a 16-year-old with all things maritime. He just loved ships and literature and, you know, all this stuff. And he convinced his dad to take him. And they came down they lived in northern New Jersey near New York City. And his dad and him had a really nice time together, kind of a father-son experience. in Washington. Then they came out and saw the ship, and really, John was very disappointed with the looks of the vessel. And next slide, he wrote this postcard to his mom, and it says, well, she's not exactly the Queen Mary. But the people that were on the ship were all these convivial people. They were all sort of, of a kind. They were city people. They didn't have a lot of sailing experience, but they were romantic and they were adventurous and they were all up for an adventure. So they started off and had a great sail. The first day they left, you can do the next slide. The first day, they set up from Annapolis and they went over to the lee side of Poplar Island. And they sailed short-handed because I told you about the two boys that were the deckhands, but the one guy did not get on that trip. He wasn't going to go. And the person that Meckling had hired to be the replacement deckhand showed up Monday morning at City Dock drunk. So he made a bad decision to sail short-handed. He did have Steve Morton, a very good sailor, as his deckhand, but that's a big, big boat with a lot of sail area to be handling just two people, So they go to Poplar, they sit down, they do their thing of having the alfresco crab feast, because back in that era, apparently, all you had to do was send Steve Morton overboard with a crab net, and he could catch enough crabs for 20 passengers. Amazing, 24 passengers. And they steamed them on deck, had a great time. The next day, they got up early and they went to Oxford. They spent the day at Oxford. They went, a number of them went on the ferry over to Bellevue. They came back. They all went to the Robert Morris Inn for dinner. They watched Dragnet. They had a really nice evening. And now, I don't want to downplay Meckling because he really, he was keeping an eye on the weather. Hurricane Connie had formed. It was a hurricane. It was off of the coast of Florida by about 500 miles on Sunday. Tuesday, still hurricane warnings are flying up from Manasquan all the way to Florida because they really didn't know what the hurricane was going to do. So Meckling made the decision to take the Marvel to Cambridge, where he had a commercial berth that he used. So he uses this commercial berth where you can actually use cables to tie the ship. And his thought was he would be holed up in Cambridge, way up the chop tank, out of the weather. And, if it was going to blow, they'd be in a much better position than they'd be if they were in Oxford or St. Michael's, which probably would have been their next stop. So he takes them there. Of course, he sells this to the people on the ship as, this is great, Oxford's great, but you're going to love Cambridge. It is much more metropolitan. They had a movie theater. You can go to the movies like, ugh. But anyway, they go off to Cambridge and they stay in Cambridge overnight. Some people do go to the movies and they get up the next morning. And the next morning is Thursday. And the first thing that Meckling sees is the guy at the yacht club removing the hurricane warnings. And they come to find out that it looks like the latest forecast is that the storm is going to go offshore and not going to come ashore, not be a danger. And everybody is in high spirits. Meckling says, great, beautiful day. And he says, we'll start back for Annapolis today, but first let's go for a swim. And there were still storm warnings up. So you have to remember the Marvel is a heavy, heavy, heavy ship. She really needed some breeze to move her, especially with her very old sails. And so it would not be uncommon for them to be moving at 4 knots all day. That would be probably their average that they were making. And maybe 8 if there was a decent blow. So he's thinking, okay, storm warning is not going to be that bad for us coming down the chop tank and then heading up to Annapolis. This should work. So he's they dilly-dally around. They don't leave until the afternoon. They start down, and instead of piping up, the wind dies. And they drift down the chop tank. And it's a beautiful night, starry, clear. The young people are on the deck. They're, watching the markers as they go by and ticking them off on the chart. Everybody's having a great time. And let's see the next slide. And around 10 o'clock, you're going to say, well, you've made all of this detail up, Kathy. How do you know this? Well, John Ferguson, our 16-year-old, mad about everything maritime, was a diary keeper. And here was his diary. He retired at around 10. He recorded every day of the trip. We know what they ate every day, where they went, what happened. And he writes on this page, this was the best day ever. It's also the last day he spent with his dad, because that night, as they approached the mouth of the chop tank, started into the bay, the wind picked up. He turned the radio off, Meckling, at 11, when some of the older people had gone to bed and he didn't want to disturb them. Next slide. Thus, missing the critical update that indeed Connie wasn't going anywhere. She came ashore in North Carolina and was now barreling up the Chesapeake Bay and coming for them. He was completely unaware of that. But he was certainly aware at around 3 a.m. when those outer bands started slashing and the gusts started picking up. And by 8 o'clock in the morning, when John Ferguson and his dad went into the saloon to have their breakfast, water was sloshing under the floorboards. And the bilges weren't keeping up. At that point, Meckling came down, poked his head in and said he would like to ask any able-bodied men if they would mind helping reduce sail. So he and Steve had reduced the sail during the night, but he needed to get those sails down because the gusts were somewhere around 40 right now, and he was really struggling, and there was no possible way that he could keep the boat in steerage and be working with the sails. So these young guys, a couple of them were school teachers from New York. One was a PE teacher, and his friend, they sprang into action. And there was a radio engineer. He got up there, and they struggled, but they got the mainsail down. So they were sailing with just their mizzen sail at this point, and then a steadying sail, a jib. And they're in the main stem of the bay. We're now at like 9:30, and he's trying to make his way into this blow to get north, right out of the chop tank. And there's no possible way. At that point, he loses the mizzen sail completely, and they are left with no option. He cannot get to the West River, which would have been an option to hole up. Can't get there. They've lost their little yawl boat's engine, had been submerged. They make for Herring Bay. Next slide. Herring Bay is shallow, and it's very much not a place you would want to be on the lee shore during a hurricane. At this point, Connie's a tropical storm technically, but the waves are starting to get really big. And remember, this is a wooden ship that was leaky to begin with and hadn't been caulked above the waterline. She is taking water because it's just blowing like crazy. So she's taking water all across the deck. There was a 500-gallon water tank mounted on the deck that got pulled off and made a big hole Water is just pouring in. So Meckling gets the ship to in which, is not a small feat because it's narrow entrance to get in. He's drawing 12 feet. And to get in there, it's difficult. He gets in, he drops anchor, and everybody, breathes a sigh of relief. They're about a mile and a half off of Fairhaven at this point. Pinky makes sandwiches. Everyone's gathered in the deck house. Some of the people have decided to put their life jackets on at this point. They're eating their lunch. The men are now all vigorously using every pump available to them, including hand pumps, to try to dewater this thing. It becomes clear at around 1:30 that they're going to have to evacuate and abandon ship. So Meckling gathers everyone into the deck house and has the idea, remember, there's no life rafts or anything. They're a mile and a half off. You can see shore off and on, but it's that kind of white condition. That's how John Ferguson describes it. It's like whiteout almost because there's so much spray and mist and then the rain blowing. So he decides that the best thing to do with the children and the parents and all these people, the older people, to run a line through their life jackets so they'd all stay together and then evacuate together. Well, they never got a chance to do that. As they were starting up the companionway, the ship just laid down on her side, did not recover, a big wave came, slammed it, and everyone was thrown overboard. Every man for himself. And the line through the thing probably wasn't a good plan anyway. So they were all thrown overboard. Some people were trapped in the deck house still. Water, the ship, imagine the rigging is now all around you. Like every opportunity to get caught and drown, really. So getting free of the Levin J. Marvel became like the number one thing for everyone. And most of the people lost sight of each other at that point. John Ferguson, the young guy, remembers just getting on a piece of flotsam and kind of hooking his feet into like a little window area and sitting on that and writing. Next slide. It was 4 hours until the first person reached shore. It was 6 o'clock. And these guys were at their little summer cottage in North Beach, and they were like right on the beachfront, and they were stepping out as you would do during a tremendous storm like this, and to have a good look, and they're just, imagine what they experienced when they saw 26-year-old Deborah Killip, that active outdoors woman from Rochester, New York, stagger out of the sea, literally. They rushed down, they grabbed her, rushed her into the house, wrapped her up, and she said, "There's 27 other people out there. The Levin Marvel is sunk." And that started this incredible response, next slide, from the local people in North Beach. The phone lines were on fire. The emergency responders from across the state were summoned. Everyone came down to the beach and pointed their headlights of their cars because it was difficult to see shore, and made human chains to help get people ashore. And it was these two guys. So there was a duck blind about 100 yards off that somebody on shore noticed somebody waving a sou'wester from. And it was Meckling and 5 other passengers had made it to that duck blind. And these guys commandeered a little outboard motorboat, 16 feet, and took it out from the beach 6 times. to get those people in. The waves were like 6 feet tall. They couldn't put more than one person in. The one guy spent the entire time bailing. The other guy had to steer a very jaggy course, got everybody to shore. They later were awarded the Carnegie Medal of Heroism, and among many other things. They were just volunteer firefighters from North Beach. 2 young guys, pretty remarkable. Next slide. So here, Steve Morton, who was in the duck blind, and one of the other women who was a nurse was in the duck blind. This is them being rescued. You can see it's dark out. They were rushed off to the hospitals. And it was, in the end, 14 people that washed ashore dead. It was shocking. You know, like, how could this have happened in 1955? Next slide. And I guess the proximity to Washington, perhaps, was what really stirred up the press, because almost instantly there was questions from Capitol Hill and across the country. How on earth could this happen? This rotten old freighter converted to passenger service, some guy with no money who doesn't have a license running it, one kid on there. What on earth is going on in 1955 that this is, somebody's got to be held accountable for this, right? So, next slide. Coast Guard immediately summons all the survivors back to Baltimore, to the Customs House, for their hearing, which is, you know, that had to have been difficult. People, John Ferguson lost his dad. That nice psychiatrist from New Haven, he drowned. His wife had to come back down, and they all had to tell their stories. Next slide. And Meckling told his story, and it was bang, bang, bang. He was indicted immediately by a grand jury for 14 counts of manslaughter, maritime, which is an unusual charge. It's under maritime law, and I've forgotten the exact. So he's charged with negligence. He's charged with taking an unsafe vessel to sea, endangering people's lives and possessions. And most importantly, he's charged with 14 counts of sailboat manslaughter. I don't really know the exact term, but he's immediately indicted. Next slide. And so he is facing 85 years in prison and, I don't know, hundreds of $1,000s worth of fines. And his trial is set for the early part of 1956. And he's sitting in Annapolis. He lived down near Hillsmere. And he gets a phone call from a guy named Harry Leeward Seward, who was Katz, who was the attorney in Baltimore, who was a real maverick. He was somebody that really believed that there was equal justice for all. And he called him and he said, listen, you're being crucified. And the press has completely indicted you. I will take your case pro bono, providing you do nothing to interfere with my research, and we do this together. And Meckling says yes. So they argue the case in front of a very savvy judge. So Harry Katz knows not to do this in front of a jury. So he takes the option of arguing before a judge. And the judge happened to be the judge that would later become the Maryland Supreme Court, the head of the Maryland Supreme Court, and convince Spiro Agnew to resign from being the vice president during the Watergate scandal. So this guy was a very judicious individual, and he listened to the argument. The trial was mobbed, and it was covered across the nation by newspapers, and the reporters ran from every single day. They would run out and file their stories. Now, next slide, but I'm not going to tell you what happened. Skip that slide, skip it, skip it. Okay, but we don't, you have, but we'll find out what happened. But the trial, the day that Meckling took the stand to defend his own self, President Eisenhower signed the first Boating Safety Act, 1956, on May 9th, that began the process of inspection regimes for these smaller passenger vessels, requirements for their operators to be licensed Coast Guard captains, and had capacity regulations and regulations regarding where the ships could venture. So, all of you sitting here today, in one way or another, are impacted by this event. Because, can you imagine? I've heard a number of you talk about, freelancing or working at Watermark. Do you imagine if there was no inspection regime for those boats, or if you didn't have to be a licensed captain, or you could just take every single person that came to City Dock and bought a ticket on the Harbor Queen? I mean, chances are it would be fine. Overall, generally speaking, people are reasonable, but you get into the Black Swan Hurricane Connie situation, and you can see what happens. So, we, as the passengers that go on a sunset cruise when we go to a new town or take a ferry boat on Long Island, we know that we're safe because of those lives that are lost. Yeah. So that's the story. And if anybody has a question about any of it, feel free to come up and speak into this microphone because we are on Zoom. If you're got anything.
Okay, so this is your chance, it's your opportunity to ask a question. I'm going to, I have one, okay, if you come on up here and. Okay, so let me repeat the question for our Zoom attendees. So the question was, what happened to the ship? Was she salvaged?
So salvage would have been difficult considering it was like broken into a million pieces. It went down in about 18 to 20 feet of water. So it was scavenged rather than salvaged, I would say. Like if you go in South County, people claim to have stuff off the Marvel. Oh yeah, that swing under that tree over there, that's the nameplate from the Marvel. The people on the Eastern Shore have one of those 90-foot pine masts as their flagpole. So it was quickly scavenged what was laying around, and then after that, it was marked as a wreck for many years, and it's no longer. It's just kind of like smushed down into the mud at this point. Susan Anthony, she's our state maritime archaeologist, dove on it and identified the wreck by the brass sinks that were in each of the staterooms. So we know where it is, but there's nothing.
Another question. Yes, Kevin, can you come up here? Thank you. Yes. You too.
I presume you have met and or interviewed Mr. Ferguson?
Oh, yes.
Know his diary? Yeah.
Yes. So John Ferguson, he was the 16-year-old that kept the diary, and he's the last living survivor. During my research, I was able to locate him in his home in Tarpon Springs, Florida, and I went and visited him. And it was tough for him. He went up into his, okay, this is the guy that at 16 was keeping this amazing diary. He kept every clipping from every newspaper article about the Marvel sinking. And he went up into his attic. He said, I haven't looked at this in like 50 years. and he brought down this big tub, like Rubbermaid tub. And I was like, what? He had the entire transcript of the Coast Guard hearings. He had kept such an archive of the material. And we spoke many times and we became kind of close. We met up in Key West, where the other guy, Bill Verge, who wasn't on the ship that day, keeps the Coast Guard cutter Ingham. He's the museum keeper of that floating museum. And if you ever get to Key West, go say hi to him. He loves to talk about the Marvel. But John Ferguson, I talked him into coming up, and believe it or not, he and his partner moved to Rock Hall. After coming back and spending time on the Chesapeake, he did not want to not be there. And he had taken a trip on the Victory Chime up in Maine. And the Victory Chimes was actually, I told you that Herman Nust, the original owner of the Marvel, had a second ship, and then he sold it to the Maine Windjammer fleet. It's on the Maine state quarter. A Chesapeake Bay bald head schooner, ram schooner, is on the quarter for the state of Maine. It was such a beloved institution. But 3 summers ago was her last summer, because her Coast Guard inspection came up and the owner took her to Mystic, had her hauled, and the Coast Guard condemned her. So she is now in New York awaiting transformation into a restaurant. So, freighter, like 125 years of service, and Victory Chimes is still at it. You're going to go have a drink on her next summer, maybe.
Kathy has a follow-up question to Kevin's about John Ferguson. Talk about the diaries.
Oh,
I don't think I heard you
so his
mention it. But
diary, well, the obvious question that I would have thought one of you might have asked is, how on earth did he have his diary when the ship sank? It washed up. And being a smart kid, he had written his name and address in the first page. And it washed up on shore. And he got it in the mail about a month after the sinking. One of the state police troopers had taken it and carefully dried it. And it was in a zipper bag at the time of the sinking. So it got out of that, but it didn't get ruined. And so John still has that. And it's amazing. I mean, it's like you read that and you see, they had some pretty damn good breakfast. Like, who has pork chops for breakfast? That's what they were having on the Marvel. It was pretty amazing, the detail he went into on that. And the fact that that guy found it and sent it.
so the question is, are there excerpts of the diary in your book?
Yes, some, because it took a lot to decipher. You saw the handwriting, and it was kind of watery in places. But yeah, I used what I certainly it provided a lot of background material. I can tell you that.
Michael, can you come up? Can you come up? Wait, I need to repeat it because people on Zoom can't hear it. Say it again. Did the cook, Mr. Pinckney, survive?
Mr. Pinckney survived, and Charles Savoy, who was another Annapolitan who served as steward, he also survived, as did Meckling and the deckhand. The only people that perished were passengers. Yeah.
Davis.
It's still marked.
So Davis wanted everyone to know the wreck is noted, marked on navigation charts.
It's in
Herring
Herring Bay, which is about, if you're very, very familiar out of Rockhold Creek, it's like straight off.
We really need to use this mic because of the Zoom people. So let me just move
So that's
Vicky.
cool.
Name in avionics. The wreck is.
Oh, good. Well, that's good.
Did Mecklin spend the rest of his life in prison?
You got to read the book. No. Meckling actually had a whole entire second career. He moved to Louisiana and started a business in Louisiana. His son just left Annapolis. His son was here all those years, and moved. He worked at NSA actually, and then has retired to Arizona. But Meckling lived in Louisiana and did dewatering systems, and like ironic, right?
Did he do any jail time or did this lawyer get him off?
I don't know. Not getting it from me.
There is some of that in the book.
Wait for the movie.
Are there any questions on Zoom? No? Okay. Anybody else in the room? Sure. Here you go. What?
The young couple from Yale, New Haven, did they survive or were they killed?
The husband did not survive, and the wife did, and she went back to New Haven and raised those toddlers as a single mom, and spent her career in education. And I became acquainted through the research with the daughters. Those toddlers are now 70 years old. And the elder sister is working on a play of this story. Yeah. The last people to be discovered were the Sobols, and they were the people that were the oldest people aboard. They were discovered last, and it was very, very tragic in their case because they were very observant Jews. And if you are Jewish or you have Jewish friends, you know that you are supposed to bury your dead within a day and sit Shiva. And the dad got found and the wife didn't. And it tore that family apart. And I was reached out to after the book was published by their daughter, who said she had made the decision to wait for them to find the other body. And then they had the funeral in New York. There were 1,000 people at his funeral. This guy was very well known. And she said it brought her some peace in the end to see how much fun they were having before everything went south. You know, after this, and she had spent this whole entire lifetime thinking about their watery grave. And then she said, I was able to kind of reframe it and see that everything was fun. And that's really the other lesson of the story, which is, it's all fun and games until something really bad happens. So, have fun.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Kathy. I mean,
Thank you.
You're an amazing storyteller, both verbally, because I didn't know how you were going to present this, as well as in the book, which I do know about. I just wanted to say she'll be in the back with Jeff, her husband. Thank you, Jeff, for being here tonight as well. Selling any copies that if they haven't already been purchased by you. Anybody that is interested, please do that. And as you make your way back, I will go ahead and then ask for the door prize. And Bob will bring it up, and we're going to ask Kathy to draw it out of here before she goes to her book signing table after she gets demiked. Okay, so everybody pull out your blue ticket. I never take one of these. So, and I already have her book, but even if you already have her book, it would be a great gift for someone. So everyone's got their blue ticket. This is your blue ticket, not your red ticket, your blue ticket. All right. And the number is, last three numbers, 175. All right. Well done. Woo! Excellent. So I think I think the book got returned by Bob to Jeff, so go that way and someone will get you. Excellent. Okay. And again, one more slide, if we can, Will. Keep going, keep going. One more. Just to wrap up, reminding you that in a month, the last Monday of October, please Zoom in. Do not come here. We won't be here. And then if you're interested in that tour on November 12th, I urge you to sign up ASAP by the end of this week. And then please, if you're a member, please join us in this room on December 1st for a wonderful dinner. The dinner, by the way, only costs you $15. It is heavily subsidized by the board. So we are only charging you $15, but you do need to RSVP ahead of time. And beer and wine is included. All right. Thank you very much.